You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a very common thing that we see in leadership in veterinary medicine is, you either have the leader, like you said, they're like, oh, I'll go figure it out. And then they just go in the office and shut the door and nothing gets figured out, or they're just throwing resources and there's no accountability, there's no follow-up, there's no structural support, there's nothing. It's just, well, I provided the resources. Well, we took a class on it. Well, they got certified in, recognizing depression and suicide awareness. So, and it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And, I find that the best leaders and the way that I lead the best is really being in the trenches, because when you're in there with them and you're seeing and you're picking up the energy and you're seeing those little things that people are saying without the verbal cues, that says a lot more sometimes than, because sometimes people can't articulate it or they're afraid to or they don't know how to. And by picking up those interactions and being in the trenches with them, you're able to feel that and you can kind of pull them aside maybe later and say like, hey, when I was doing X, Y, and Z with you, I noticed that you shut down a little bit. Are you okay? What's going on? And not making a spectacle on the floor about it, which I've seen in leadership too, which is like, I just want to throw up into a bucket when I see stuff like that. I'm like, what are we doing?
Before we jump in, can I ask you a quick favor? Only about 1% of you listening or watching the podcast actually subscribe. And subscribing genuinely makes a huge difference because when you subscribe, it tells YouTube and the other podcast platforms that this content is valuable to you and worth showing to more people just like you in veterinary medicine. Plus, you get notified when I post a new episode or content, so you'll never miss anything. That's how these conversations grow and reach the people just like you who may really need them. If you've been enjoying this podcast or if you've learned something from it or simply feel less alone because of these conversations, hit that little subscribe button. It only takes a second and I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to Leading Veterinary Teams on Air. I'm your host, Suzanne Thomas. Today I'm joined by Cait Deppe, whose background spans hands-on medicine, veterinary and wildlife education, dental solutions, sales, and consulting across general practice, university, specialty, and zoo exotic environments. What really impresses me about Cait is how deeply committed she is to the well-being of the people inside of this profession, especially when it comes to grief support, burnout prevention, neurodiversity, inclusion, and the emotional weight veterinary teams are carrying every day. Cait, I'm really glad that you're here. For anyone who doesn't know you, can you share a little bit about your background and what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like many of us just have a bleeding heart to want to help animals. So I started in shelter medicine, taking care of cats and dogs and giving vaccines and cleaning their cages, and probably to this day one of the best jobs I ever had. Other than the pay, of course, right? So that is where I started, and then I worked my way up to being an animal control officer, and I absolutely loved that part of the job as well. And then I went over to, I wanted to do more of the medicine. I wanted to do more hands-on but without the responsibility of being a veterinarian. I always feel like I need that more adultier adult in the room. And if I'm at the tippy top, I'm like, okay, who do I go to? Oh, that's me. So I didn't want that responsibility. So I went to Harcum College and I went into their veterinary nursing program, and they set you up with hands-on externship with the University of Pennsylvania. And I knew that I wanted that experience. I wanted that hands-on, and I really wanted that name on my resume, just to kind of back up, the education and the hands-on and the experience. So I did that. I got hired right away as a OR nurse, and I was the shift supervisor for the Harcum students. So that's really where I developed my love for teaching and education, because we had a lot of fun with it. And I didn't realize that you could have so much fun with teaching. So I used to, trick the students. We would have fun. We would do a lot of like hands-on show and tell. It was great. We had a really good time. So I loved doing that. And then I went to VSEC, the Veterinary Specialty and Emergency Center. I stuck with ophthalmology. Absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. I really liked narrowing in on a niche and just developing my love and skill set for eyeballs. And then I just developed this insane travel bug where I just started to feel suffocated and like my skin was getting itchy and I'm like, I need to go do something else. And I needed to travel, but I couldn't afford it as being a nurse and living in the city. And I had a dog and, just everything that your young 20-year-old soul craves. I just felt like I needed to get out and see things. And so I took a job in Washington State and I started working in sales in manufacturing in dentistry, really developed a love for that. I did a little bit of that at the University of Pennsylvania, not a whole lot, but really got to develop an expertise and experience with that and traveled the world doing it. And I absolutely loved it. I met some amazing people. I learned from some just industry experts that, people just will do anything to get their knowledge from. It was just handed to me on a gold platter. It was amazing. So I did that for a number of years and then came back to the East Coast and now I'm in distribution. So kind of a little bit of a wild ride. I did a lot of exotic medicine in between just working in manufacturing. And so they would hire or not hire, but they would ask us to come in and help with the dental procedures. And we would do that. We would take x-rays, we would go in, we would assist. So a lot of that in there as well. Did a little bit of GP in between just to kind of, help keep those discounts for all of my animals and keep my skill set up too, because I feel like when you don't use it, you lose it. So I really wanted to still be able to speak on my experience. And so in order to do that, I needed the experience. So I'm still in distribution. I do consulting as well on the side. So any pet loss, bereavement, grief support, I still support the community in that as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I mean, wild, right? It sounds like you have such a broad lens and there's not really a piece of vet med that you haven't really touched, right?
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, listening to your background, there's not many people I've heard that have said that about opto, right? Your love of
Either love
eyeballs.
it
I
or
was
you
like,
hate it.
But you know what? I have a background in oncology and kind of similar, right? I spent years in oncology, and when I talk about oncology, people have a very similar kind of reaction as my reaction to you talking about eyeballs. I was like, I didn't make the face, but internally I was totally like, uh, but same thing, right? I'll talk about oncology like it's the most amazing thing, and people are like, "Oncology means cancer," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know what," but I forget that like cancer's sad, right? But it's not when you actually are in it and you're treating those patients and you're getting to know those clients and it's actually really wholesome when you're doing it. I have never actually worked in ophtho, so I don't know how eyeballs can give you the smile that it just gave you and is giving you right now, but I believe you.
When I worked with, I had the honor and the privilege to work with Dr. Shelby Reinstein. And so funny because one of the first things she said to me is she's like, you are going to love ophthalmology. So she said, you always get gifts, everybody's always happy, and you never have to euthanize anything. She was so right until unfortunately we did have to euthanize. It was really sad. It was this puppy that came in and his eye was just so like, it looked like it was gonna pop out of his skull, and, we did a CT scan and saw that he had cancer behind his eyeball that was pushing out, and so
Mhm.
because of just how which is pretty rare, like, you don't typically see that, right? And so that was, like, maybe a half a year into working with her, and I was so upset. I'm like, "Shelby, you lied to me," and she's like, "This never happens. This is not the norm."
That is
But
so
that
funny.
was yeah, that was one that stuck with me because I was truly expecting to never have to euthanize anything in ophthalmology.
What do you think that someone that is really only ever been in one lane of veterinary medicine might miss that you've been able to see because of your experience being so broad?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like sometimes people just can't get out of their own way, and we're creatures of comfort, right? So, like, when you find something that you're good at, you don't really necessarily want to rock that boat. And so it's like, okay, let me just stick to what I know and what I like and what I'm good at. And they don't necessarily want to challenge themselves. And I think there's so much self discovery in pushing yourself out of those limits and finding things that you never thought you would be good at. Like, to this day, I don't consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself an educator because I speak from experience. And yes, I'm one person, but like you said, I have a very broad background and I have a lot of hands in a lot of different pots. So I'm not just speaking from that one lane. I'm speaking from multiple lanes, multiple avenues, multiple practices across the country. And so anybody that's just narrow focused, I can't stress enough to just branch out. And that doesn't necessarily mean moving or, changing your career, but even if you just volunteer or if you're working part-time, pick up another part-time job, even if it's once or twice a week to just, get your hands in there and just see what you like and don't like. I cannot stress that enough. I just and I feel like you also meet people along the way too that may introduce you to things that you never thought that you would like before. I mean, even like traveling, like I was not a foodie at all. I was very much like I like my chicken fingers and fries and that's it. And then, you start traveling and it becomes a cultural thing and you can't, say no to abuela when she just made you, handmade tortillas and, she's out there rolling the tortillas. I was like, okay, I guess I got to eat this now. And they're great. So it's like just put yourself out there. You never know what you're going to like and you never know what impact you're going to make on somebody either.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, right? You have no choice to not like you have no choice but to say yes when they're literally handing you the plate and shoving the food
Mhm.
into your mouth. If you have never been in a household like that, you have so my husband is Haitian, and Haitian families and Spanish families are very similar. And so I you cannot go to his family's house. And I mean similar to Italian families too, right? Like you can't go to their households and sit down and not have a plate of food put in front of you. And I'm like, "No, I'm actually really okay." And they're like, "No, eat." And I'm like, "No, no, but I'm okay. No, no, eat." And it's like
No, 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 no.
anymore.
They're insulted. They're genuinely insulted, and you're like, "Okay, I guess I'm gonna gain 50,000 pounds
Yeah.
eating this food," and at first you're appreciative, and then you're like,
Right.
Now I'm uncomfortably full."
Exactly, exactly. But it's so good that it's like, you know, whatever, it's fine. How has that perspective changed how you think about support, right? Because you have also you do all of these things. You've touched all of these places in veterinary medicine, but because of that, I imagine that has kind of opened up your mind to so many things. Has that kind of changed your perspective on how we look at grief, how we look at support, how we look at teams in our profession?
Absolutely. A lot of it, from my experience, comes down to just like the magnitude of the teams and the trust building in the teams, and frankly, how busy the teams are. So when you are working, for example, in like a huge specialty practice, there are so many things that are going on. And if your team doesn't have that structural support, like if there is bitterness and animosity and like teams just not collaborating well, I mean, of course, that's going to lead to faster burnout. And that's going to overall affect the structure and quality of the medicine and just the services that that organization is providing. And, just on the other end of that, by being a pet owner and, by traveling so much, sometimes I do have to go into those road clinics because my dog is, throwing up in the car and I'm like in the middle of somewhere, Ohio. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I have to go into this random clinic. And, I've been in those situations. And so I've walked in through front doors and you can feel the energy shift immediately and it's palatable. And, if I'm feeling that, you can't expect those animals aren't feeling that. So now they're on edge, they're stressed out. And now the team that's already on edge and stressed out is dealing with a stressed out animal, and that's causing more stress to them. And then they're going home at the end of the day and they're asking themselves, why am I doing this? And so there's a lot of self care that comes from that too. I think there's a lot of not just communication, but also comprehension skills that go into working with teams and working with, cross cultural teams too. Like you said, like if you were in working in oncology and I'm working in ophthalmology, our paths may have never crossed except for maybe that one case that I was referencing earlier, right? And it's like, okay, I've never met Suzanne, I've never talked to Suzanne, but now I have to have this full conversation with her. I have to work with her. So you have to be flexible and open to change, even if you are narrow focused, because you just never know what's walking in through that front door. And I can empathize and I know that it's hard for people too, because I feel like a lot of people that pick these professions do have some neurodivergence, right? Like it really fulfills my ADHD heart to be able to go and bounce around and do all of these things. But some people may be on the other end of the spectrum where they are just so keyed in and so focused. And if you disrupt their pattern or if you throw them a curveball, they just can't handle that. And so I think it's up to management at that point to make sure that people are positioned in the right places in order to prevent some of that burnout as much as possible. I mean, it's going to happen, just because that's the nature of the profession is, you are going to get some compassion fatigue and some burnout, but if you have the right people in the right places and the right support and the right structure, you can eliminate a little bit of that happening.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is a lot of what I talk about and a lot of what the people that are in my direct, circle, the people that I kind of refer out to are talking about right now is that structure, right? Is that if we are I kind of push a little bit back on you with the like can we prevent it? I think we can. And to your point, it really does fall in the hands of what our leaders are doing. I think that if we are putting people in the right places, but also putting them in the right places with that support. And that support might look different every day. And I think that's the piece that we're not necessarily always focused on. Every person every day might need different support because let's be real, every day brings different challenges and not just in the clinic. We also have to remember people are people outside of work, right? What happens to that person who's neurodivergent? What happens to that person who's not neurodivergent who just got a flat tire on the way to work,
Yeah.
right? And you add in the layer of neurodivergence and struggles with change, struggles with things that are outside of the norm, whatever it is. And now they just got a flat tire, or they just got news that their mom is sick, or they just got whatever it is. And now they have to come into work and be asked to do all of these other things. And we have a profession that's full of all of these things, right? And so I think that if we put in place as leaders, we put in place structure that allows for those things to happen, and we essentially build in situational awareness so that when shit hits the fan, we know what to do, essentially like an algorithm, right? This happens in everything, not just, I think a lot of places do it clinically, but we forget about doing it for our people. If we do it for our people, when these things happen, this person comes in and they're not having a good day, what do we do? Right? I don't think we think about that. And that's why we're just like, I don't know. We run away, right? I'm going to go hide in my office and figure it out, right? Like, because we don't know, because we're not trained how to do that. But I think that we're starting to have some of these conversations. People are starting to be like, we should probably talk about this. And some people, not a lot, but some people are like, that's really uncomfortable. Right? And hopefully more people will start to have those conversations and realize that burnout is a lot bigger than just this like catchy term, right? And I don't love the idea that like we actually can't fix it. I think we can, but it's a lot bigger than just some wellness programs and some employee resource groups and some employee program things that we can throw at people. Here, do this. No, we need a little bit more than that. We do actually need to do some things every single day as leaders for our people. And that's going to take some work on the leader's side too. And that also might mean the leaders looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying, we might actually need some work on us too. And I think that's something that I'm working on. I think that's something that some of the people that I'm working with are working on. Because if we're not also working on ourselves, how can we work with our teams, right?
1,000%. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I feel like that's a very common thing that we see in leadership in veterinary medicine is, you either have the leader, like you said, they're like, oh, I'll go figure it out. And then they just go in the office and shut the door and nothing gets figured out, or they're just throwing resources and there's no accountability, there's no follow-up, there's no structural support, there's nothing. It's just, well, I provided the resources. Well, we took a class on it. Well, they got certified in, you know, recognizing depression and suicide awareness. So, and it's so much more than that. And, I find that the best leaders and the way that I lead the best is really being in the trenches because when you're in there with them and you're seeing and you're picking up the energy and you're seeing those little things that people are saying without the verbal cues, that says a lot more sometimes than because sometimes people can't articulate it or they're afraid to or they don't know how to. And by picking up those interactions and being in the trenches with them, you're able to feel that and you can kind of pull them aside maybe later and say like, "Hey, when I was doing X, Y, and Z with you, I noticed that you shut down a little bit. Are you okay? What's going on?" And not making a spectacle on the floor about it, which I've seen in leadership too, which is like, I just want to throw up into a bucket when I see stuff like that. I'm like, what are we doing? Like,
You
it
see me?
is
I'm like, ugh.
oh my god, and there's so much more of that than the and I think that's another problem that we're seeing too is, these a lot of leaders don't know how to do that. Like, they just are awarded the title and, because maybe they're really good at a different form of leadership, like maybe bookkeeping or whatever, but it's like you said, there's just so much more to it.
Yeah, and I think that, as you're talking, it's reminding me about this post that I saw on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. There was a technician or a CSR, I can't remember, and they posted that management keeps saying that they are doing all of these things, that they are, paying attention and looking out for burnout, yet we're drowning. And it's like, managers, hello, what are you looking out for? Right? Like to your point, they're doing the training, they're doing the QPR training, they're doing all of these trainings. They're going to the conferences, they're doing the thing. But then what are you actually doing with it? Right? Like what are you actually looking out for? Are you putting the thing up on your wall that you've done the training? Woohoo! Yay,
Right.
kudos, we did the
Right.
training. Like, what are you doing with that? And I've had this conversation with hospital managers before who have come to me and said, I want to become a CVPM. I want to do this. I want to do that. I commend you for wanting to have all of these letters behind your name and do all of these great things. But I just want to warn you that the credential means nothing if you do nothing with it, right? Yes, I have what I have been told is alphabet soup behind my name, right? Like, I get it. Ha ha ha. I have a whole lot of letters behind my name. If I do nothing with it, it means really nothing, right? So, if we're going to the conferences and we're going to these leadership trainings and we're doing all of this work and reading all of the books and doing nothing with it, we're just really wasting our time, right? Do something with the information. Action is what is necessary. Sitting there and saying we're watching out for these things doesn't actually help your team, right? So, for leaders that are listening, right, what are some things that you think they could be doing better right now to support the staff that are dealing with grief and dealing with burnout and dealing with things that are weird right now in the hospital?
Yeah. So I think that's also going to look different for obviously every practice, and every person. So what I found to be the most successful is doing and it doesn't have to be weekly because you have some people that it's like water off a duck's back, right? Like they're like, I don't need my check-in, I'm good. But those are also the ones that you also have to make sure are actually good, right? Because they may be like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And then they're having a breakdown on the side of the road on their way into work because they have a flat tire, right? So I think spacing out those check-ins, just depending on the person and doing it personally and individually. Also doing some team building, whether that is, blocking off an hour during the day. And again, this could be like quarterly, weekly, however you see fit for your team. And I really like some people don't like it, but I feel like it's probably cringe the first time you do it, but then you keep doing it and it's like, okay, that you get a little bit more comfortable is I love role playing. I like putting people in situational areas, right?
Thank
And
you.
it's like I love doing that because it does. It puts a little pressure on you, your pores open up a little bit, all eyes are on you, and you kind of get a little nervous, but like this is your team. And I don't like saying, I'm gonna contradict what I'm saying here, but I don't necessarily like saying like, oh, like we're family, we're family. I spend more time with these people than my actual family, right? So like I don't necessarily like everybody in my family, and I'm not always going to like everybody that I have to work with, but I have to be able to work with them. And I have to be able to, like you said, look in the mirror and try to pick apart, like, what don't I like about them? Because oftentimes it's a reflection of me and what I have to work on, right? And so when you're put in these situations with them that are not real situations, but you can kind of work through them, you can get to the other side. So when you are in a real situation with them, you know how to navigate that better. The other thing I really like doing is opening up like cross training. So putting people in the right places. So if you have somebody that really likes working the front desk, but maybe they really want to get some hands on in the back, let them do that. Why wouldn't you want them to do that? And, maybe you're short staffed one day and you need someone to have an extra set of hands, do a couple more withdrawals, but obviously making sure that you have the structure and the support to accommodate both sides. You don't want to leave the front desk high and dry while you have all hands on deck in the back, but you're setting that person up for success in the sense that they're able to pick their own future. They don't have to leave your practice in order to go find what they're missing in another practice. I really believe heavily too in just grief support for clients. So when people lose their animals, especially in GP, because you're going to be dealing with euthanasia is a lot more than or even urgent cares and emergency. You're going to be dealing with a lot of euthanasia. And if you just have anybody that's helping those situations, that's going to contribute to a lot of burnout and compassion fatigue if they're not set up in order to want to do that, right? So like I may be okay doing that, but you may hate doing that. And then we get to the fifth one in the day and you're like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to get to work tomorrow, right? Because you're just so exhausted from doing that. And so making sure you have the right people that have the right personalities to be able to handle that kind of loss. And even the people that can handle that, they need a break too. So you can't just have one person just set up on euthanasia appointments, all day, every day until they decide that they've had enough. So being able to rotate some people through positions too, I think is just really well rounded. It really helps the individual. It also helps them understand what's going on. I mean, how many times do you have like the wars between the front and the back? And it's like, oh, well, they overbooked us again. Like, oh, well, they're behind on appointments. But if you're able to work both sides of the spectrum, you have a lot more compassion and understanding for why we're overbooked or why we're, behind on appointments in the back. And I
Yeah.
know that's, a little bit of maybe a fantasy for some clinics, but I really believe that, you can get there. You just have to be able to put in the work to do that and, have those real conversations with the practice owners too. If they don't want to hire an extra person or they can't, it's not in their budget. Okay, well, what can we do to get us there? Look at your finances, comb through some stuff and do you have to add more appointments? Do you have to charge more? I feel like a lot of us are still undercharging in a lot of areas too, despite hearing everybody say the opposite, right? Like you hear that all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a person who has basically worked every single role in the hospital except doctor, and who has worked operationally as a hospital manager and then also as a multi-site operator, right? I have overseen multiple hospitals as well. I think that it's important to realize that there's more than just one way to impact revenue, right? There's like what you just said, there's bringing more patients in, but if there's not more patients to be brought in, you can increase your prices, but you can also maximize the appointments that you have. And you don't have to do that by being slimy and salesy, right? Are you offering fecals to every wellness appointment? I don't think we are. I'll be honest with you. Uh,
No.
I've been in a lot of these appointments and I've been like, when was the last time this pet had a fecal? Like, are we even just saying that this is best practice? It doesn't mean that they have to do it. Let the owner decide. I think that there's so many times that we are saying, I don't think that they can afford that. Well, how do you know? You didn't even ask them, right? We're just making these assumptions based on whatever we think when we're not in their wallet. We don't know what's important to them. What we do know is what's right for the pet. So just tell them what is right for the pet and tell them what is the options. Now I'm getting all clinical, but like really, right? That's how we maximize what is in our appointments by offering all the things and also being honest with them and saying like this is a conversation between us and it's your pet. So, like, you know what you can do. This is what is best for your pet, but also what's best for your pet is what's best for you. So, like, no judgment. We'll do whatever we got to do, but like, let's have a
Right.
conversation, right? Like, I think that we get so hung up on like, we don't want them to stop, right? Like,
Yep.
we are so worried about sounding salesy and just do what's right for the pet and talk to the owner like they're human. And the owner's going to appreciate that. Like, talk to the person like you would want to be spoken to, not in medical terms because people don't understand that. And they'll appreciate that. Like, I want you to tell me all the things my pet actually needs. And then I'll be like, okay, can we do that maybe next time? Because, like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't have all that money, and all the things, right? Like, let's have a real conversation. Getting back to what you were saying about euthanasia and all of that, I think it is really important to switch people out. To your point, I think that when we have one person doing the same thing all of the time for multiple reasons, it's important to protect people's mental state, mental health. People are going to, for whatever reasons, there's lots of reasons why people could be like, no, 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 I'm fine. No, no, no. They might feel a sense of, responsibility to keep pushing. They might have grown up in the type of environment where they feel like if they don't, they'll get in trouble or they'll be looked at in a certain way. I think it's important for, and you're shaking your head, so I'm assuming you agree. They might think that they might either get in trouble or that they'll maybe don't have the safety to say something. So I think for me as a leader, I always want people to know that it's okay to say something if you are not okay. And so, how I go about this, and I'd love to hear what you would do, how I go about this is to say to people at first, like, I will ask them, are you okay with continuing? What do you need? I will poke and I will prod and I will say, like, you know what? You've done 5. It's time to switch off. Like, even I won't even ask them, like, are you okay yet? I will tell them it's time to switch. And then they'll be like, no, 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 it's fine. No, nope, you're switching. Right. And then eventually they learn that it's safe to say, hey, actually, at 4 is actually my max. Right. Because I have put it into place that it's okay to not keep going. I think if we just keep asking, hey, are you okay? People are mostly going to be like, yeah, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, until they're not fine. And I'd rather catch that before.
Such a good
In your
point.
experience, would you agree? Is there something else you would do in that situation?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I think that can change on the daily too, right? Like you said, like, okay, maybe my norm is 5, but today it's 4 because I have the stress of my mom being sick on my mind, right? And it's setting that standard and that precedence of, hey, it's okay to not be okay, like you said. I think that's so important, and it's a really great foundational framework for your team to also build trust and like, okay, Suzanne's already told me it's okay that I'm not okay. And they have that safety and they can come to you and say, hey, I'm not doing good. I can't do this at all today. Can I just, help with billing or help with whatever, or you know what I mean? So like they're still there and they're still participating and they're still getting their hours. But even sometimes you have to like actually kick them out. I've had to do that before to some people where because they'll just run themselves into the ground ragged. And I'm like, okay, your mom just passed away 2 days ago. You just had to euthanize your dog last night. Why are you here? And some people will use the excuse, well, I just need to keep my mind busy. I need to check out. Well, then go for a walk. Go do something else. Like you can't be at work, using work as your outlet, which I do love and I do appreciate a hardworking person that, however their outlet is. But I don't want that to come across like, okay, well now, you do have to work through this, right? Like it's like you can work through it, but not at work. You have to go find a different outlet and then come back when, you're actually ready. I have had that before. Literally. Her mom passed away a couple days ago. She had to put her dog down the night before and I'm just like, girl, get out of here. You're not here today. No, 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 no.
That's
Yeah.
wild. I mean, I had one of the managers that I was overseeing, she had like, not to get into her personal story, but she had like literally 4 things happen all at once, right? So she had like, everything happen all at once. And she went to work and I was like, why are you at work? And she was like, same, right? It was, oh, I just need to, and I was like, no, no, you need to go. You need to take care of you. And I understand, right? For some people, being home is harder, but also you're not useful here. And if you need to be here and be in the back room because being home is harder, I don't care if you physically can't be home and you just need to be in a different space, but you are not going to be clocked in and working because, like, clocked in and working, you're not actually working. You're not here. And I can't have you being with patients, being with clients when I like with the work that we do with patients and clients, you're not here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really hard for some people to,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, I do think that most people appreciate that when there is that safety and there is that relationship already built. I think on day one, that probably conversation probably wouldn't go over very well. But I try very hard to build those relationships early so that if and when those conversations have to happen, it doesn't come across like Suzanne's being a jerk. It's really, I care about you and I also care about our patients and our clients. This can't, like, you're not in a good space, dude. Like, go home. Or go sit in the break room, that's fine, but also, who are you serving right now? Not
Right.
you or them, really. I mean, truly, right?
Yeah.
I think,
Well, and
you know,
I like leaving it up to them too, right? Because like they can care about you in every way, shape, or form that satisfies me, but that may not absorb well with you. And
yeah.
so I like to have those conversations. Like this is more of just like I call them hard asses, right? Like they don't let any or my prickly cactuses. Like they just don't let anyone too close. You can't hug them, and they're just kind of like right, like they're a little bit of a curmudgeon. And so I like to, I'm very, like, extra playful with them, not to, like, not to not push them over, but, I'm a little bit more, like, quirky and dorky, I guess, because it's like, "Oh my god, like, she's so ridiculous," right? But it's like, I'm breaking you down a little bit. But then I like to ask them, like, "This works for Suzanne, but what is this going to work for you?" Right? And, you've seen how we interact here, you've seen how we do X, Y, and Z, but I've noticed that you're not very receptive to that. So what works for you? Like, you can't always have the same leadership style and the same support for every person because everybody's so different. And so, like, I had somebody on the sales team who everybody just absolutely loved, and he was great. I mean, the customers loved him, everyone loved working with him. But when he would have, I called him, he would have these little temper tantrums. And we all worked in the office at the time. And sometimes he would slam on his desk, and sometimes like he would go, like really loud. And it's like, and everyone's on a call, dude, right? So he calls me from across the sales floor and everybody calls me by my last name. So he's like, Deppy. I'm like, okay, like you don't know if I'm on a call right now or whatever. So I go over and he's like yelling about something and I just leaned over and I just looked at him. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, why are you asking me that? And I'm like, well, I'm like, just the way you're communicating to me right now and like your reaction before you called my name, I'm like, that's not normal. I'm like, so what's going on? And he just kind of sat back and he just paused and he looks at me and he's just like, I'm having a really bad day. I'm like, what's going on with your day? And he just started telling me about his day. And so, there's like a little therapy that goes into that too, right? But you also have to be careful because, I took a risk there by asking him if he's okay. He could have exploded by that, right? But I feel like there is a lot of risk in leadership too, because, you have to, I call it the vibes. You have to go off the vibes and you have to go off of, what's feeling appropriate. Because if he was still like belligerent and crazy and, going off, like, I probably wouldn't have asked that in that moment, but he had a breath beforehand, and so I think that that's also really important is, just asking how they need to be led because that looks different for everybody.
I want to pause really quick from today's episode because I have to share something with you that I'm really excited about. In just a few days, my new workbook officially launches. It's called So Now What? And I created it for people who are either brand new or have been in their role for years, but still feel like nobody ever handed them an actual playbook. Because so many people in veterinary medicine are promoted into leadership and then expected to just figure out things as they go. This workbook is designed to give you more structure, clarity, reflection, and practical guidance for navigating your role with more confidence and intention for the first 30 days. All the details are linked in the show notes. So when you're done with this episode, go check it out. Okay, now let's get back to the episode, shall we?
Something that I typically use and something that I share with people is to give them words, right? You said role playing before, and I was like, yeah, because I love role playing, mostly because it gives people the words to use before they actually
Mm.
have to use the words. And so one of the things that I typically use myself and something that I give other people to use is similar, and that's to say, I don't. I don't need you to tell me all the things. Whatever is going on is impacting what we're doing here, right? So if there is something going on, I need to know if there's something I can do to help you with what is happening here, right? Like bringing it back to whatever we're doing here so that they don't, and if you want to tell me more, by all means, right? Like it gives them the space to be open to share whatever is going on, but also gives them that buffer, especially if they are that prickly person. Because to be honest with you, you just said the people that don't like to be hugged, don't hug me. Like I'm a New Yorker. I have a huge bubble. I am like fun and like all, but don't touch me, right? I'm that way unless we have passed that barrier of like, okay, cool, we're friends now, right? Like, but it's actually really funny. I need to be better about communicating like when that happens. But some people will be like, I know you don't like hugs. I'm like, oh no, we're past that. They're like, I didn't know we were past that, right? But I'm like, oh well, I'm good.
You're gonna have to be the initiator. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm
I have
the
to like,
opposite.
but
I'll hug everybody. I'll hug a
generally
pig
I'm pretty
if I
pretty
have to.
prickly, but only with the touchy stuff. Anyway, so I digress. This is where the ADHD comes out.
Yeah.
In general, though, I will say to people like, "Are you okay? Listen, I can see that there's something going on, or things are clearly wrong. I don't need to know all the things, but there's something happening here that is impacting what's going on here. So whatever that is there something that I can do to help you through whatever it is here? If you want to tell me more, by all means, but like we don't have to get into the personal stuff if you don't want to, right? So like whatever feels good for you to say that in whatever language is good for you, but it's usually helpful for people to be able to not have to be like, tell me your life story. Right? Like this is
Right.
not
Right.
necessarily a therapy session. And some people get like really weird about asking like, are you okay? Right? Like tell me about your day. Like I don't want to know about your day. Or like,
Right.
I don't want to know your life story, Matthew, right? Like I don't care, but I also don't want you to be a jerk to me, right? So it's kind of that thing. But if we're in a leadership position and you have Sarah at the front desk and she's like I can't have that. So,
Right.
Sarah, what's going on? You don't have to tell me all the things, but like what's happening here? And is there something that I can do to fix that so that like, or is there something that I can do to help you? Do you need to come in later? Does something happen? Like, do you need a break? Like, how can I help you now so that we can fix that? Like, you need a snack? What do you need?
Usually a snack.
I did one time ask a doc, this was really bad. This was way before I was in leadership formally. And I asked the doctor that I was working for or working with, I was like, hey, do you need a Snickers bar? And she looked at me and she was like, what? And I was like, sorry, I thought I was being funny because you're clearly in a bad mood. So I thought you were hungry. It didn't go over well. I didn't read the room very well that moment, but
So that's okay. It happens.
I was like, sorry, I thought you needed some food.
And that is a good point too, to touch back on not needing to know all the things. I was listening to this podcast the other day where they were talking about like not need they didn't say it like that, but they said like not needing to know everything in order to help the situation now.
Yeah.
However, sometimes like that's just so unavoidable. So like for example, like okay, the flat tire incidents, right? Like maybe that just totally wrecked that person's day. And there's nothing happening at work in that moment, but they just can't get over the fact that now they have to spend $250 on a tire. They're doing the math in their head. They're like, that's a half a day of work. And now they're all stressed out about it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so unfortunately, I've found that like I don't have a degree in counseling, unfortunately, but also fortunately, because that's so much responsibility. But I've found that so many people are willing and wanting to tell their life story. And so like you just have to like, okay, you sit through it. And then at the end of that, I have this habit well, I've had this habit of wanting to like, I'm a fixer, right? So I'm like offering this unsolicited advice, and you could wreck someone's life by doing that, right? Especially if you don't have the right training. So I've gotten really good at listening through and then saying, do you just want me to listen or do you want me to respond? And then 9 out of 10 times, they're like, I just needed to get that off my chest. Great. So
Yeah.
now what are we going to do about work? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm good. I just needed to get that off my chest. Like, okay, great. And then you can kind of move on from that. But I think that is a really good point too. And I'm going to adopt that because you don't always need to get into the weeds with everybody. So, like, maybe changing that up in the beginning of like, hey, do you want to tell me about that? Or how can we just fix this right now in this moment? You don't have to tell me all about it. But if you want to, I'm here. My door's open. Right.
Yeah.
Because there could be something that you could help them with, or they just need to vent and get it off their chest and move on. I'm kind of
Maybe
like that.
they just want to tell you a piece of it and not all of it. Or
Yeah.
like they want to just tell you the piece of the story that has to do with the tire and not the piece of the story that has to do with the fight that they had with their husband before they got in
Right.
the car on the way to work. They don't want to tell you that part. But maybe that
Yeah.
happened too. And maybe there's a lot of other stuff that's happening, right? Because like 9 times out of 10, there's more than one thing that's happening in a person's life at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And then it's compounding. And let's be real, like think about your own life. Most of the time, there's more than one thing that's happening. And then it takes one little tiny sliver that cracks it, and then everything falls apart, right? It's the one piece of garbage that is left out, or the one cabinet that's open that it's like, why is this? And then everybody's looking at you like, what the hell happened to her? I don't know, maybe it's just me. But
Me too. You're in good company.
I freak out, and I mean, I'm home and my husband's like, "What in the world is going on?" And I'm like, "If you only knew, right? Of like the 19,000 other things that just happened, but I don't have the capacity to tell you all about them. So, like, you're only seeing this one little sliver, and the sliver seems like insignificant, right? And that happens at work all the
Mhm.
time. We see the
Yeah.
person who is snapping at the person at the front desk, or we clients, right? Clients come in
Mm.
and they snap at the front desk, or they snap at our technician, or they snap at whatever, and we're like, this person's crazy, da, 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 da. If we and listen, some people are crazy, don't get me
Right.
wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here and saying that like we need to, because that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast, but try to give people like a sliver of benefit of the doubt and like realize that we are all people, and most people don't wake up thinking, I'm going to make this person's life miserable today. Yes, some people do, but most people don't. I want to believe that, so that's what I'm going to believe. And so,
I believe it too, girl.
okay. So I just want to like put it out there that Mrs. Smith is probably not walking into the clinic saying, I'm going to make your life miserable today. She just wants answers because she cares about her pet, right? And so, and whatever is happening. And maybe in that moment, that's the sliver that is broken the camel's back right now for her. Who knows? Who knows? Right. And unfortunately, we happen to just get that from everybody. And so, like, we have to protect ourselves in all of it. And we have to also realize that we have that. And then we have the car situation and the husband situation and the drawers in our houses and the kids and all of it, right? Because we're people and lives, and it's complicated and it's all interconnected, and it's never just one thing. How lovely it would be if it was just one thing.
I know. I know. And I feel like it's also going back to like that subtle just energy exchange. Like, we're in a profession of helpers and healers, right? And even on a subconscious level, that can sometimes get taken advantage of and taken for granted. And so if you're having a bad day and you're just like walking around like and then you walk in and then you compound that with your, grief for Fluffy that just got diagnosed with cancer. Now you're freaking out on the doctor and the nurse that just delivered this information to you, right? And it's like, we're all here because we care about your dog, but you're taking it out on the people that are here to help heal your dog, right? And it's like, it's kind of like this almost like bullying. And I don't think it happens on this conscious level because I agree with you. I think that people are just naturally more good than they are evil, but we sometimes get wrapped up into, just this human existence. And, sometimes you take that shit out on people. And sometimes more often it's the people that are helping and healing and they're the empaths of the world. Right. And it's like, I feel like we kind of get shit on the most out of everybody because we are in this like healing profession and we do have that energy where people think that they can just, storm over us and have that kind of energy and approach. And it's like, well, no, you can't. And that's where boundaries are important. And that's right. So, and that's
Yeah.
a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it winds up being I'm not a like psychologist. I do have a minor in psychology, so I have like a sliver of training. But originally I went to school to be a psychologist, so I like to pretend like I have a little bit of training.
Right. We're arm side
I
or
took some
armchair
classes.
psychologists.
I took some classes in psychology back then. I've read a bunch of books. 'Cause, that's how we learn all of the things. But all jokes aside, I think that what we do as humans, we put our emotions on what's easiest. It's who's in front of us, right? So and we all do that. I think that is, human nature. It's dynamics of what we do in teams, it's what we do in, one-on-one situations, it's what we do in our families. I mean, look at how people interact, right? That is psychology. I did learn that in psychology and I've watched that happen my entire life. I do it, right? When I
Mhm.
get upset, who do I take it out on? The people who are right in front of me, right? My husband gets the brunt of it, right? Do
I
I
know.
want to do that? Is that what's intended? No, of course not. But that is human nature, unfortunately. But it's what's important is that we recognize that we do that and we do the best that we can to not do that on the people that we love and the people that we care about and the people that don't really deserve it. So if we recognize that we're doing that, we should be the first ones to stop what we're doing because we can only control ourselves, right? We can't control other people. So to that end, I think for our teams experiencing that, knowing that people do that, what I always tell people is that since we can't control other people and we know people do that, we can control ourselves and we can control our reaction to those people. I know if somebody is getting mad at me, it is never about me. I didn't do anything to make them mad. If somebody's coming at me and they're yelling at me, I know Mrs. Smith is not mad because her pet is sick because I made the pet sick. What is true in this situation? Her pet is sick. She is upset. Her pet is sick. She's yelling at me. I didn't do it. So I'm not going to yell back. I'm not going to match her energy because what is that going to do is just make her more mad, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to be the calm one in the situation. And I do the same thing with my team because somebody in my team is upset. They come at me. What is true in this situation? They're coming at me because I'm probably the easiest target because I'm the closest to them. But I didn't do anything to make them mad. And if I did, I'm going to admit it because that's who I am. But I'm going to ask what is true in this situation, right? And that's what I recommend people do. I think it's important that we kind of separate ourselves from that type of situation and that anger because if we just match that energy to your point, that energy in the room, if we're matching that energy, that's not productive. That's not going to make anything better, right?
Mhm.
This conversation has gone exactly what I told you was going to happen. It has gone like 15 different directions. I do want to touch a little bit on burnout, and so we spoke a lot about grief, but I think a lot of people kind of mistake grief and burnout and compassion fatigue and all of these terms kind of get intertwined. And I
Mhm.
think that burnout sometimes gets used as kind of this catch-all term. How do you think about the difference between burnout, compassion fatigue, grief load, and just plain being like unsupported in leadership?
Yeah, so I think burnout is a little harder to catch sometimes because it happens so slowly. And so like burnout and I think it feels and looks different for like everybody. But generally, it's just this complete or like this tiredness that you're starting to just kind of carry into every single day. And then eventually you're kind of hitting this compassion fatigue where it's just this exhaustion. And there's exhaustion kind of throughout all of them. But with burnout, I feel like you're able to push through it. And so you're kind of I call it like the ball in the chain. So you kind of have this like chain that you're just, this ball that's weighing you down and you're just dragging it through every single day. And you may not even know that you're in it because we've just been so conditioned to have this like normalization in society that you just got to keep pushing through it, like pull up your bootstraps and it's like, okay, like no honey, you're burned out. So like just take a day, take a break, take whatever. And then it grows and it festers from there. And that's when you really are just kind of hitting this wall. And then, you kind of get a little bit of like depression. You maybe get a little bit of some mood swings and you're just really not yourself. You're maybe not eating right, you're not drinking right, you're not taking care of yourself the way that you need to. And you start to have this like separation a little bit. So like the things that you used to love and the things that used to give you energy are now taking away your energy. And so, like you kind of said, like if somebody comes to work, but they're not really there, like they're home, but the lights aren't on, right? And it's like, so, you'll experience that, I think, more when you're doing things that are just not in alignment with you. So if you're, for example, just going back to the numerous euthanasias that you have to do, when you're constantly seeing a crying client, you may cry with the first one, but by the 10th one, you're kind of like, "Okay, I need to go get my lunch," right? And it's like, that's your 10th euthanasia of the day, but that's their first euthanasia they've ever had to do with their pet. And so being able to carry this energy of support and compassion into every single appointment is really hard to do. And so you start to see this separation with the compassion fatigue. And so, just being able to recognize that is really important. And, like you said earlier, just having that safety net and that foundation so people can, articulate that and say, like, okay, I'm at my end. That's really important. So they're not just getting pushed over this edge.
Do you think that leaders sometimes unintentionally make things heavier for their teams?
I think they do. I don't think it's intentional by any means, but I think that's why it's important for them to also be on the floor with their teams, right? Because it's like it might be easier for them to say like, okay, get a blood draw on this cat while they're already holding and they're already doing, X, Y, and Z. And they have 50 million other things that they have to do after they're holding for this animal. And it's like, okay, but can't you just like help? Can't you just drop blood on the cat and just cut? Okay, no, okay. So it's like, it's that one other thing. It's that little straw that's going to break the camel's back. And so I do think that there's this unintentional, just like workload that sometimes gets put on the rest of the team that can just be taken off from leadership, right? Like if they just do the thing, they're not overburdening the team with these little things that they may need them to do. But then, like we said earlier, that's also important as the leader to sit with yourself and be like, okay, like you also have to delegate. Like you can't be that leader that's like, I'm just going to do all the things because I don't want to ask my team to do it because they're going to get burnt out. Okay, but then you're going to get burnt out too. So there really is that fine line and that balance, of course.
Yeah. And that kind of goes to your point earlier about being on the floor with your team, knowing your team, and something we haven't really talked about, which is kind of what you're teetering on there is utilizing your team, right? And I know that's something that you talk about a lot, which is, technician utilization and you know, I think there's a connection there, right? Utilizing your technicians, utilizing your team, not just your technicians, but probably every role in your hospital. And there's probably, wouldn't you say, some sort of connection between utilization, leadership, and probably even burnout, no?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just making sure the right people are in the right places, but also trusting them to do that. Right. Like I used to work with this doctor who she loved dentistry, which I love. I love for her. But she was such a micromanager that she would not let anybody else do dental x-rays. And it's like, why? We're all skilled. We're all trained. We can all do almost textbook picture perfect x-rays. And I kid you not, Suzanne, I would do an x-ray. It would look identical to hers. I still have the picture because I'm still like the way I would get gaslit and just like I'm like I would feel insane every day after I left that place. And I had a picture side by side, my x-ray and her x-ray. And I remember asked my team leader, I'm like, can you tell whose is who? And she was like, no. I'm like, okay, thank you. Because literally, there was no difference. And she just couldn't get out of her own way. She couldn't trust her team. She couldn't let us do what she hired us to do. And so she would try to do all the things. And then by lunchtime, she was literally in tears almost every single day. And I'm like, well, that's because you have 5 assistants doing laundry. Like, what are we doing here? It was insane to me. And so I think a lot of that has to come down to also just trust. And, at the end of the day, it's not my name on the front door. It was her name on the front door. So, like in a control way, I understand where she's coming from, but you have to do some internal work. You have to trust people that you're hiring to do the
Yeah.
jobs that they're meant to do and not hold them back. So, some of those assistants wanted to get a little bit more hands-on, and they were absolutely amazing and they were excellent. And, again, I'm an educator. I love teaching. And so I was so happy to take some of them under my wing and, just go over some basics. So this way I could do the probing, scaling, charting, dental x-rays while I didn't have to be like looking at a monitor and scaling at the same time, which we know is not best practice at all. And so by helping somebody getting up to speed and feel comfortable and confident to monitor while I'm looking down, but also kind of, checking because that's my control freak, working on it. But it's hard to let go of that control sometimes. But again, you just have to trust the people that you're hiring. And,
Mhm.
if people want to do more, let them do more, of course, to their capacity and, what you feel comfortable with them doing. Like, obviously, you're not going to let them do, like prescribe medications and stuff like that, clearly. But just making sure, again, you're just trusting your team. And I think that that's a big part of what comes down to it. And even in like leadership too, like even you have practice managers that don't trust their team, but then they're, hiring more CVTs. And it's like, but we have a bunch of CVTs and you're not letting us do what we should be doing. So why are we hiring more?
Right.
And even VTSs, like I laugh because, now we have these programs that come out and it's like, oh, veterinary practitioner. It's like, or not veterinary practitioner. What's the word? There's like an in between. Uh,
The new
is
V
it? Is
the
it?
new VPA.
Right, and I'm like, "But isn't that what a VTS is? Like, isn't that what they're supposed to be okay." Right? Like, I'm confused. Like, why are
Theoretically.
we
Right.
right? Like, why are we, like, making the wheel a square now? Like, can we just stick with the wheel?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that again, bigger conversation, but I do think that, as 2 credentialed technicians in this room, it's a wild it's a wild conversation listening to some of the people who talk about that. It's pretty wild to listen to the reasoning. Yeah. And I feel like I'm just going to leave it there. But but to your point, when we're not utilizing people, it really does come down to trust and the lack thereof. And to go back to what you were just saying, I think that, when we're talking about educating the people around us, and one of the things that I'm actually going to go back further, one of the things that you said just now was that the name of the doctor was on the door. Essentially, what that says to me is liability, right? And one of the things that has always come back whenever I have pushed back on technician utilization, I actually wrote a book about technician utilization
Mm.
and what it's really about technician utilization and empowering your team and what we can do as practice managers to do that in a really practical way. Um, for trust and things, right? And every time I bring it up or every time I talk to corporations or practice owners or hospital managers, always comes down to liability. Well, it name on the door is the doctor, right? It comes down to the doctor having liability. Literally is always what it comes down to. And while that is true, let's talk through all of the things that we know there is data, right? JAVMA, AVMA, there is data that shows that when you use your credentialed technicians that are trained to do things like dental x-rays, that are trained to do things like all of the things that the doctors do not need to be doing, like blood draws, like aspirates, like x-rays, like all of the things, right? You can go down the whole list. I don't have to say them all, you know them. And you take away all of those things from the doctor, you are adding revenue to your hospital, which is what these companies, these doctors that own the practices care about because they want to keep the lights on, right? And I'm not saying that all we care about is money, but when they're businesses, we obviously have to keep the lights on, right? So if we want to keep seeing pets, we want to keep caring about pets, we want to pay our people, we want to keep the lights on, we have to care about money at some point, right? That's realistic. So we have to think about that in some capacity. We have to trust our people. You can't, no matter how much you want to do it, you can't do everything yourself. If you were going to be a one man show, a one woman show, you would open the practice and be the one doctor doing it all. You wouldn't have very many patients, right?
Mhm.
You have to trust your
Yep.
people. You have to do it. If you want to hire on the job trained people to do the work, then train them the way you want them to be trained and let them do it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and yes, I just said that. I did. Those words came out of my mouth. The one who talks about credentialing just said it, but they're not even doing that. They're training the people that they want to be trained, and then they're still not letting them do it, right? Like, that's the thing, is that there's no standardization. There's no, like, it boggles my mind that, like, you are so, and I'm a control freak, right? But like, we are so controlling, so controlling. We want everything to be controlled. We have to do it all ourselves because if we don't do it, it's not going to get done right.
Mhm.
2026. Like, this is not new news, that is not a good way to do things. Like, you want to talk
Mhm.
about burnout, you are literally burning yourself, and you're doing it to yourself.
Right.
What?
Right.
Look in the
And
mirror.
that is such a good point. That it's so funny you brought that up because it's like it's not to shit on the job training medicine, but you're so right. Like these doctors, like they don't see the importance of credentialed techs, so they'll just hire anybody and everybody to run anesthesia on an animal. What? I mean, you can't do that in the human side, so it's just weird to me too. Like, yeah, it is 2026, so why don't we have the standardization of care when it comes to our animals when most people are choosing to not purposely have children? So these animals are now becoming our children, right? And now the plants are becoming our pets. So it's like, because we're choosing not to have kids. And it's like, why is this not more of a thing? And so we don't always have the support of the doctors that have the names on the door because they think that they can just teach anybody and everybody how to run anesthesia and keep an animal alive during a splenectomy, but they're not even doing that. Like you said, like they're just hiring whoever, and then they're pissed off and they're mad that they have to train people. And then you just have a body that's standing there thinking, like, okay, like they're just, putting circles and X's and squares on, an anesthesia sheet. And it's like, that's not what you're,
If
that's
that,
not what we're supposed to do.
if that. Or you have what I saw on, I think it was LinkedIn, a LinkedIn post where the doctor is like, "Oh, it'll be fine. I'll just monitor anesthesia at the same time." What? To your point, you shouldn't be monitoring anesthesia and doing the dental at the same time, because how
Not
do
at
you
all.
focus on two things at once? If I am tying off a surgical site or have my hands deep into an abdomen doing a splenectomy, how am I focusing on making sure this animal doesn't bleed out while also paying attention to a monitor? I'm listening to it. Come on. I'm sorry. But we know that we shouldn't be paying attention to just monitors, right?
Hmm.
Because machines lie. And this is not to shit on doctors either. Like, I want to just be clear. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me why we are not doing better for our patients, right? Like, we are, the whole goal is better patient care. Trust the people that are here like us and the people that we are hopefully trying to train up to take care of our patients, right?
Right. And we
So,
want better business as well, right? Like it
right.
may not be our name on the door, but I take a lot of pride in the place that I work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I want to do a good job. I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to help animals. I want to be able to help our teams. And, right? So it's like your team wants to be here just as much as you do. And I mean, I think that says a lot more because their name isn't on the front door and they're still giving their blood, sweat, and tears. Right? And yeah, there has to be a lot more trust across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I I can't agree more. To you, does a healthier, more humane version, is a big question. What to you does a healthier, more humane version of veterinary leadership look like?
Definitely having more accountability. And I think like what we touched on earlier is looking in that mirror and sitting with yourself on how you can be a better person just in general, right? Because like if you're not doing the work at home and you think that you can just implement change in the practice, that's just not going to work, right? So like if you're just kind of this like hot mess express, you're terrible with finances, you can't get your kids out the front door, you're showing up to work late every day and you think you're going to run this like five-star practice with this A team, that's not going to happen, right? Like I mean, I am a little bit of a hot mess express myself, and I can confidently say that, like, right? But I also don't want to lead a five-star practice, right? Like, I want to kind of help get the teams to where they need to go, and then I want to leave, right? Like, and so, but I know that about myself, like I've led plenty of teams. I've been in the trenches with plenty of teams to be able to know that about myself. So I think there has to be a lot of self-reflecting, whether that be them going to doing their own workshops, doing their own team building. Therapy is also an amazing thing. Like there's so much you can learn from yourself by just sitting with yourself and being alone. I think that's also a big thing too, is people just don't know who they are. And maybe they're afraid to sit with themselves because of what the voices say or what other people might say. And it's like, but just do it. I learned so much about yourself by just hanging out with yourself. And that really does transfer into like how you communicate with people, how you communicate with teams, how you see yourself, right? Because if you see yourself in a poor light, people are just going to shit all over you and you're just going to take it. And then then that's going to validate those bad words that are in your head. So I think there has to be a lot of accountability and just self-reflecting and having really good boundaries too, like emotional boundaries. Like what you were saying earlier, like if Mrs. Smith is screaming at you because you just told her that, Fluffy's not doing well, that has nothing to do with you. But if you have poor emotional boundaries, you're going to absorb that and you're like, oh God, Mrs. Smith is right. I'm terrible. Like, this is my fault. And it's like, no, it's not.
I I think you're absolutely right. I think that when we are absorbing other people's crap all day long, it is really hard not to let that happen unless we have all of that stuff either figured out or being figured out. Therapy is a really good thing. I think that people get really uncomfortable being alone. And I don't know if you saw my face, but for anyone who's just listening and not watching, I made a funny face when she said being alone. Go out and touch some grass is something that I like to say. But I think that, for people who have trauma and have background stuff, being alone is hard and being with your thoughts. And you also said the voices in your head or the thoughts in your head. And I made a face to that also um, because I was like, oh, how many voices do we have in our head? I have a lot.
Same, same.
I mean, PhD, there's always a lot of things happening up there. But I think that again, jokes aside, it's important to find quiet, whether it is actual quiet or otherwise. And sometimes that quiet, quote unquote, is community and finding other people that understand what is going on in um what is the what I'm looking for? I think sometimes it's we think we need solitude and what we actually need is community. I think that's what I was looking for.
Mm. Hmm.
And what I have found is being a little bit more open to telling my story has brought more people that are similar. And you realize that you're not the only person that has gone through whatever it is you've gone through. And I don't necessarily mean getting all like super deep and personal and being like, when I was a child, I don't necessarily mean that. Also, just realizing that, like, in vet med, a lot of us are going through the same crap, right? We all
Yeah.
have a Mrs. Smith. We all have a Dr. Jones. We all have that thing, right? And find the Facebook group, find the management group. I happen to have a Leading Veterinary Teams community, right? Like, find the group, the people that you vibe with, and hang on to them because you might actually find some people, find that community that helps you feel better, helps you like bring out some of that. And it might feel less like a task to be alone, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes total sense. To clarify, I don't necessarily mean like hermiting yourself and completely just going into a cave and closing the door, although I love doing that. Like, I
It's
call it my
great for some
hibernation.
people. For some people, it
Yes.
can actually be really scary. So I think that, like,
Yes.
I kinda wanted to just make sure that there was options there, right? Because I think for some people, the
Absolutely.
thought of go going and sitting alone is like, "Oh my god, well, I'm not ready for that," right? Like,
Right. But sometimes you have to, right? So, like, if you're driving to work, you're sitting alone, you know what I mean? And, like, but sometimes we drown out the noise with, like, music or a podcast or whatever, or, or if you are in the bathroom, you're on your phone, you know? So, like, I would just love to challenge and encourage people to just start small. Like, maybe while you're waiting for your food to come out, if you're out to eat, like, engage with the people around you. Don't distract yourself with your phone, or leave your phone if you need to go to the bathroom. Like, you don't need to bring your phone in there with you, right? Or if you're don't do it. I would encourage and I would challenge you to not do it. Just something so small like that. And it doesn't have to be like this hibernation that like I love to do, but just take a moment, or like, while you're just like driving to go pick your kids up or something, if it's a 3-minute drive, like just sit in that silence for 3 minutes. See if you can do it, and if you can't, you can't, but I would love to challenge people to do that.
quick question, are you a reader?
I love reading, but I don't like fiction.
That's okay.
Okay.
I ask everyone, and now it doesn't have to be a leadership book, it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't matter what kind of book it is. I ask everyone if they're like rapid fire, if there was one book everyone on the planet has to read, what is it?
Oh god. Rapid fire. Well, I just read this book. I literally just read it, like, the other day, and I just love this author. I think I actually have it right here.
I'll give you like a
I sure
second to
do.
figure it out.
I don't know if you can see it. There it is.
Homesick
It's called
Nomad, is that what
Home.
it says?
Yes, yeah, so she's actually an Instagram influencer. I started following her in, like, 2012, and, this is her 3rd book, but she's so real, and she just talks about, so I feel like her life kind of always paralleled mine. So this particular book, she talks about, kind of right what we were talking about, being alone, finding that solitude, and then, like, finding your community and learning that by finding your community, that doesn't take away from your independence and your solitude and who you are as an individual. And so she like lives in the desert in her van with her dogs, and she's just awesome. Like, I know, like total heartthrob.
I want
And she's just I know, and she's just, like, she's so real, and, like, she curses, and she just doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks, and she wears the most wild gypsy clothes in the middle of the desert, and she dresses up for herself. Like, I just love her, and I love her books. So, I think a lot of people can relate to what she's saying, even if you don't wanna go live in your van in the desert with your dogs, right? It's just about owning your most authentic self, and also finding that community that supports that.
I have, slowly been dripping these. I don't know who she is, but I'm about to find out as soon as we're done with this conversation. I'm gonna go find her, and I'm gonna go love her. But I have been, like, slowly dripping these ideas about buying a van and going and living off grid to my husband and my kids for
Yep.
years. And
Yep.
my son recently was like, "Wouldn't it be cool if we, like, lived in a bus and, like" and I'm like,
It's working, it's working. Pennsylvania has the largest RV show in the country. We're going, and we're gonna go look at some RVs, so I hope I see you out there on the road.
"Don't tempt me." So, before we close, is there anything on your heart that you wanna share, that we didn't get to today?
I mean, we covered a lot, but I do think I do think it's just, so important for everybody to just know too that, like, if they're in the season of a change and they're looking at jobs, or they're looking at other roles, or they're looking at just a change, I think it's super important to not limit yourself. And I like to always leave people with a message like this because I'm just speaking from experience. When I was a certified veterinary technician and actively working that role, and I wanted to travel, the job that I applied to, I didn't meet one criteria. They had all of these things that was like requirement, requirement, requirement. And I'm like, I'm just going to wing it and see what happens. And they hired me. I mean, it was To this day, I'm just baffled that I didn't meet one of their requirements. I mean, they wanted at least 2 years in sales. They wanted you to have a valid passport. They wanted you to have, like, all of these other things, and I'm just like, "I don't meet one of these." But they hired me, and that risk changed the trajectory of my entire life. And so I just encourage everybody to also do that. Like, do not limit yourself. Let the other people that are interviewing you see if you're a good fit. And you know what? You need to see if they're a good fit for you too. It's not just a one-way interview. So, I just love to encourage people to do that.
I love that. I love that. A really amazing tip, especially for people that are in a career transition. I know that's not really at all what we've been talking about, but it's a really great tip because I know that there is a lot of that happening right now with all of the things that are happening.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I also see a lot of people asking about, you know, do I get into this? How do I get into that? And I'm sure that there are people thinking about, well, they would never hire me, so they wouldn't even click on the button, right? So you
Yeah.
just never know. Shoot your
Click the
shot.
button. Just do it. Yeah. Click the button. Network. Click the button. Just do it.
I love Kate, thank you so much for being here and for this
Thank you.
conversation. I think this is one of those conversations that really gets underneath what so many people in our profession are carrying and what better support, better leadership, and a more humane profession could actually look like. I'm really grateful for your perspective and honestly for the work that you've been doing and for the work that you're probably going to continue to do for many, many years to come. For everyone who's listening, thank you for being here for another episode of Leading Veterinary Teams on Air. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone in veterinary medicine who needs it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If this episode hit home, but you're still wondering where to go from here, start with the clarity assessment. It'll help you identify where your leadership is breaking down in your hospital and what kind of support you and your team actually need. The link's in the description below.